Welcome to a special edition of the Liberty Without Compromise live stream broadcast. We are the only live local liberty-minded program right here in Kootenai County. We are your hosts, Dan and Donna Wilson. You can always find more information on our website at libertywithoutcompromise.com. We're going to be bringing on a guest. First, we want to give you a little context about the group that she represents. Eye on Elections is a grassroots organization made up of Idaho voters who say that they're focused on promoting transparency and accountability in the election process. Their work centers around concerns with centralized, computerized voting systems, and they advocate for changes that they believe would increase verifiability, such as greater use of paper records, local control, and more direct oversight. Now, it is important to be clear on this. Some of the claims and conclusions presented by this group are controversial and not universally accepted, but as part of ongoing conversations around election systems, public trust, and how elections are conducted, we do believe it's important to hear directly from the people raising these concerns. So with that, we're bringing this perspective to the table. And now joining us is Teresa Roth, who represents Eye on Elections here in Kootenai County. Welcome to the program, Teresa.
Hi, Dawn and Dan. It's great to see you again. We worked together. You know, I was very supportive of Dan's run office for sheriff. And that's kind of got one of the things that actually got me into this mess of elections. So anyway.
Yeah, we know that anytime you're on this show, it's going to be a lively show. We always have spirited discussions, and I love your approach, which is no holds barred. You come in and you have your facts and you present them. You put a lot of time into what you present. You truly believe what it is that you're presenting. And I have to say that I have a lot of respect for that. Now, I know people are going to, throughout this broadcast, we will get the comments where, what is the proof? If this is her figures, is it peer reviewed? But I can assure you that Teresa, with her background in her engineering, electronic engineering, correct?
Correct.
That Teresa knows her stuff, and I would welcome other people to take the data that she has provided and that she will be providing and run it for yourself. This is way above my comprehension. That's why she has to break it down for people like me to better understand it. But I'm looking forward to what you have to present to us today. And without any further delay, give us kind of a background on what you're going to be presenting and why you're doing it.
Okay. Well, as you know, elections, I've only really been working on those elections for about the last year. In fact, actually, it kind of kicked off the night of the election of 2024. When I found some problems in that election that really, really disturbed me. Before that, I've been mostly focused, elections, I was following them. I thought other people were really in charge of this stuff. I didn't really realize until I got into it how horrendously bad things were. And the name of this program is, 10 shocking facts about election fraud. And that's because I knew it was bad and I knew that there was election fraud, but yet by being involved, I've been, oh my gosh, it can't be this bad. The really shocking thing about how bad it is how much it's being ignored by the very people who should be most concerned about it. So that's one of the shocking things, but we're going to get to that. But anyway, I think people need to know there's a lot of confusion and misinformation. I've been researching this and I'm very technical, and we've been focusing on computerized election fraud, and it can be very technical. And so we have a whole web page where all of the issues I'm brought up in detail. So I've written about, at least 15 or so articles. And so for every one of these points that I'm bringing up, there's a lot to back it up. And I'm not going to try and go into the technical stuff for this. This is an overview because there's nothing that I'm going to go into that should be hard to follow for this. So when I talk about the things that really shocked me about how bad our elections are, you should be able to follow them, no problem at all. So that's the whole purpose of this, is to keep it at an understandable level. Okay, so I think that's, so I think that's it. So let's go ahead and we'll start with the first page, which is just kind of my introduction. So like I said, the presentation's called 10 Shocking Facts About Election Fraud in Idaho. And I'm starting here with fact number 10. And the fact number 10 is that the company that manages Idaho elections is right next door to the headquarters of a high-level Freemasons. The Shriners International. Now, this is all in Tampa, Florida. Now, I found this out. I wasn't even looking for this because it never even occurred to me that that I should be looking, that the Shriners would be right next door to the 10X software, which is the software that actually controls Idaho elections. And it boggled my mind. What I knew before I ever set foot in election fraud was that Idaho was founded by Freemasons. And the first 12 or 14 governors were all known identifiable Freemasons. They set up the whole state, and they've been very, very influential ever since. And yes, right now, the form, we can talk about this at a completely different time, but Masonry doesn't look like it did 100 years ago. It's splintered into a whole bunch of different groups. We've talked about the FOP as one, the Rotary Club's another. It's really complicated to go into. So Masonry doesn't look like it looked like 100 years ago, but it's been very, very influential. So I wasn't surprised that Masons were involved in election fraud. I was shocked to find out that the Shriners International headquarters, where that is in communication with every single Shriners Lodge and Freemason Lodge in the United States, is right next door to a corporation that writes software that controls elections. And the more you learn about 10X, the more terrifying this is going to be. But anyway, so we're starting with number 10, but we're going to
hold on.
Yeah.
I got to interrupt you real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
There's going to be people that are watching this saying, so what? You have two organizations that have buildings close by. So what? How do you make the jump from Masons and Shriners, which are 33-degree Masons, correct?
They're high level.
High level Masons, rather, making the jump to, okay, they're controlling the electronic elections.
Do you know what? In my presentation, what I am pointing out is a absolute fact, indisputable. This is from Google. If you Google 10X software, you will find that it is next door or just down the street from the Shriners headquarters. That is the only thing I am claiming at this point.
Okay, so it's just
however,
a coincidence.
A coincidence. However,
yeah.
It is also 100% true and undeniable that Masons founded Idaho and have been very, very involved in Idaho government from day one.
Right.
Okay. From the territory, times of territories. That's a different. I have an article about that that we can cite. So I actually have very good data on this, but let's talk about that when we come to the end, because I want to spend most of this time talking about 10X and the thing that is. I am not at this time making specific accusations against specific people, but I am raising this as a huge, huge red flag. Okay, got it. Okay, next. Okay, so this was the first shocker, and like I said, I was on Smart Cities, and I've written about the NIC, problems with NIC, very suspicious of those people, and so I was following. The only one of these candidates I knew was Greg McKenzie. And I wasn't really campaigning for the KCRCC. I voted for the KCRCC people.
And for folks that don't necessarily follow, the KCRCC is the Cooney County Republican Central Committee. NIC is the North Idaho College.
Right.
Okay.
And so I was, pro, I didn't want the NIR candidates to win.
North Idaho Republicans.
Right. But I wasn't really that attached. But when I saw this data, what happened is the night of the election, when I was following mainly the sheriff's race, I happened to look over, and the first results that came in at about 10 o'clock on Tuesday are shown over to the left as initial results. Okay. And then they were very peculiar because instead of being broken out as early voting and absentee voting, they were all mixed and jumbled together in a very strange way. So I was very disturbed about how the data was being reported, because normally I would be able to extrapolate from the early data and figure out how the races were going to go. I couldn't do that. So I was irritated, and I thought it was very weird that they weren't reporting the data that way. But I didn't think anything else. I went to bed, and I didn't even look at the data till about 11 o'clock the next day. And then it took me a while. It wasn't until I think, later that night when I noticed that the final results exactly matched within a quarter of 1% the initial results.
Yeah, because normally you see when the voting tallies start coming in, like the absentees, they may show a stronger lead for one candidate over another. The same thing with the early voting. But as the night grows, you start to see the trend towards where it's running. But at this case, the trend that was shown in the early results of the combined absentee and early voting matched the final outcome, which according to you and your statistics is virtually impossible.
It cannot happen. It cannot happen. There was 20 races on this ballot, 20 races. And there was no correlation for any of the other ones that were anywhere near close. Most were off by 2 to 5%. The closest to this was the sheriff's race, which was only off by 0.5%. But for all three of these races, this is not only fraud. This is computerized fraud. This is machine fraud. This didn't even include all the absentee ballots. So this was an absolute, complete, 100% verifiable proof of machine fraud. And anybody who really looks into it, I mean, if you didn't pass, third grade math, or not everybody can say with confidence that this is impossible, but I think anybody who really looks at it, it is statistically impossible. So I was shocked to find this much proof, because I looked at many races that were suspicious, many things that seemed off, many things that was that's too big of a difference, but this was statistically just impossible. So I was, my hair was on fire. So this was my first shocker, and this is what pulled me in, because I couldn't ignore this. I couldn't ignore it. So let's go on to the next thing. So what did I do? I spent about 4 days just poring over this data, breaking it down by precinct, and just I called Greg McKenzie and talked to him about it. He was the only one I knew. I wrote up the article, which is still there. The article is on the North Idaho Slow Growth website. And this was published, I think, 4 days or 5 days after the election. And then I wrote a very carefully worded letter, and I sent it to all of the county commissioners and the county clerk and all of the KCRCC leaders and all of the candidates before the election was certified. This is several days before the election was certified. I attended the canvassing meeting, and which was recorded, and the recording is still there. And I requested that, first of all, I went and got all of the commissioners and the clerk to acknowledge that they had gotten that information. And then I raised my concerns, and I said, please investigate this. Please delay certification and investigate before you do this, because this is absolute proof of fraud. And you have the data. I've given you the data. You've acknowledged having the data. So what did they do? Nothing. They stonewalled completely, pretended that the data didn't exist. It wasn't, I expected them to certify, because there's enormous pressure to certify. If they had not certified, huge amounts of pressure would come down. They would have gotten phone calls from everybody. And, so I felt that they were under pressure to certify, but they could have at least asked a question to kind of cover themselves. They didn't acknowledge anything. The KCRCC people didn't acknowledge anything. People like Jeff Tyler, who's always been 100% reasonable and has gone out on gone out a limb for me before. Oh no, he wouldn't touch it, wouldn't look at it. Dave Riley wouldn't look at it. That nobody would look at it. I don't know anything about fraud. I don't know.
It doesn't surprise me that a Fed would not be looking into it, but that's another story.
Nobody would. This was a hot potato. Nobody would look into it. Okay, let's go on next. Okay, so another thing where they kind of have you as well. If they really thought there was fraud, they do a recount. Well, that is something this shocked me. Okay, why didn't we request a recount? Because if you read the Idaho code regarding recounts, by law, recounts cannot be done by hand. I talked to Jennifer Locke and I requested a hand recount in just this case for just maybe 10 precincts. And she said, no, I have to follow the law. Any election that is tabulated, because some counties count things by hand, they're so small, but any county that uses a tabulator to get the results must by law use a tabulator to do the recount. So you're completely over a barrel. You're trying to prove tabulator fraud, and you are forced in a very constrained way to only look at that one race, and you can only hand count a very small fraction of them, and then you declare the tabulator good, and then you have to do the rest of it. So there's no way to do a count. Now, worse than that, the exact same thing as if you read the actual code for audits, because the Secretary of State says, we do random audits after the election, and the code is exactly the same way. It's completely rigged. They only do even year elections, so they never do any local elections. They only do state level elections, and they pick the elections randomly. So they're not making any effort to find precincts where there's any reason to think that there was fraud, or any races where they think there was fraud. And when they do the audits, they only audit one race, and it has to be state or county. And so it's just ridiculous. The audits are ridiculous, and the recounts are ridiculous, and they're terrible law, and they're written to facilitate and cover fraud. I mean, these are bad laws.
Who wrote these laws? Lobbyists?
Yeah, I think the election technology companies that have the fraudulent elections wrote the laws. I mean, they're terrible laws. It's all set up to, and then it's, no, they didn't request a recount, so they must accept the results. And that's the story that gets told to people.
It seems absurd to me that you would say, if you got a question about a machine and its integrity or accuracy, the only way to confirm that is through humans. And if humans cannot do a hand recount, then you're exactly right. You're at the mercy of whoever programmed this equipment, and you have to take a machine's word that everything is accurate and true.
You know what? I don't have this on the slide, but I'm going to tell you, the Ion Elections Group, and this was about 6 months ago, one of the laws says that after 2 years, you destroy the ballots, or you are allowed to destroy the ballots. So what we did is we went to 5 different counties, 5 different county clerks, and asked every single one of them if we could have any ballots to practice hand counting. So we said, we just want, 10 precincts worth of ballots from the 2022 election. Any precincts, just give us ballots that we can hand count, because we wanted ballots to practice hand counting. No, these are ballots that they are about to destroy from 5 different counties, and none of them would allow us to have them, and none of them could cite any law why we couldn't see them. The lawyer for Ada County ended up writing an incoherent letter that we could punch 55 holes in, saying that the law wouldn't let him do that. And then we pointed out the problems. And he said, well, it depends on how you interpret the law. You know, it's just ridiculous.
Classic.
So anyway, so audits are BS, recounts are BS, and we are not allowed to see the ballots. Okay, so even the ballots that are about to be destroyed, we can't see. People cannot access the physical ballots.
And there are no watchdog groups with citizens from Idaho that get to oversee the election, meaning that when there's new software or any of these topics come up, there is no citizen oversight. Is that correct?
No. Okay, so we need to keep going because there's a lot of shocking things still to come. Okay, so now I had to decide what to do, because recounts were a dead end, audits were a dead end. So I understood why these politicians couldn't face up to machine fraud. Machine fraud strikes at the heart of the legitimacy of the entire political class. I mean, if you acknowledge that machine fraud can exist and has existed, then fraud vitiates everything. So it's a very, very serious matter. So for a while, I took I tried to be as nice as I could be, and I can be nice when and Jennifer always answered my questions, but I wanted to go forward in a positive direction and not bring up the NIC thing, which was once a election is certified, it's again legally almost impossible to overturn, no matter how fraudulent it is. We should have been able to overturn Biden's election, and you saw how that didn't work. So of course I'm not going to be able to overturn this election. So work positively and try and find ways to make the tabulation system. So we focused mostly on the tabulators. And when I started looking into this, again, it was another hair on fire moment. I had no idea how bad this was. And I like Jennifer Lutz. She's very nice, but she 100% trusted the election technology companies in a way that I just couldn't even believe. So the whole, again, the election technology companies run the elections. I should have had a picture, because I had a picture, but I didn't really want to use it because I don't want to get in trouble. But I have a picture of the Kootenai County election room on that night. And the person right front and center is a consultant from ESS, and he is running the tabulators. And this wasn't just for this election. Every single election for the last 12 years has been run by a consultant that was flown in from Omaha to run the tabulators in Kootenai County and make sure there was no problems. Now, the problem is obvious. If there are back doors to these tabulators, then a consultant from out of state could easily know those, and he could be being paid by somebody to cheat, and it would wash the hands. That way nobody in the elections office has to get involved.
And who would know?
Nobody would know. Everybody would have plausible deniability. So I'm like, you can't do that. That's crazy. I can't believe that you let this guy in there. No, we didn't let him in there. We paid $7,000 for him to come. But also the everything is confidential and protected in the contracts. You can't see even the documentation, the software. It's all proprietary. And what was the other thing on that list? I need to go back to the slide. Oh, yes. Oh, here was the other thing. We were asking, well, what software are you running? Because only certain software configurations are actually certified. So how do we know we're running a certified version of the software? Well, the Kootenai County Elections Office doesn't even have records of what software is running. All they have is a PO for hiring an outside firm.
Wait. So there is no log of what version of ESS software is running on the tabulators that counts the ballots.
All they have is basically they have a contract to bring in the consultant to run the elections, and they have another contract to bring in a local software guy, not the Kootenai County IT guys, but an outside contractor to do maintenance and to do software updates. And there's no records even of when they get done or what was updated.
How is this possible? I mean, is this state law that allows this, or is this Kootenai County being haphazard?
You know what? I was just shocked. I don't want to point fingers. I think this is how it's done.
Well, let's point fingers.
No, I think this is how it's done. My orientation is not to trust people and not to trust customers and to cooperate but verify. And there's no and it looks like I don't want to zero in on Jennifer Locke, but
she's the one in charge.
But she inherited this system. This was a system she learned, and it was put in place by Dan English, who is now, and he was the one who put all this stuff in place. And there was two other clerks that were in between Dan and thing, and both of them just accepted the system and set it up. She was just doing what everybody had done before. She did not create the system at all. This is how it has always been done. I was said there's 12 years of receipts of paying thousands of dollars to bring a consultant in from ESS to run the tabulators. I couldn't believe it. I mean, this was shocking to me, and it wasn't shocking at all to the people in the elections office. It's like, oh yeah, that's what we do. So, this is, a different point of view, to put it mildly. Okay. So I think, we focused on the tabulators. We came up with an alternative that is on the website called the Truly Transparent Tabulation System, which is basically separating out the scanning function from the tabulation function. It's very easy to do, very cheap. This is what I was hoping could be accepted because it doesn't really ruffle anybody. Nobody wanted to talk about it. Brett Reagan has a completely different plan that's 200 times as expensive and doesn't solve the problem. So,
well, maybe he can pay for it then.
Well, I'm not even going to talk about it. They've got money for it. They've always got money to buy more electronic technology. They have no money to do anything by hand. Okay. So, or to do anything that leaves a verifiable paper trail. So money for computers, no money for humans. Okay. Which is a constant theme. Okay. So let's keep going. So, what we started looking at, though, was the bigger picture. So we honed in on the tabulator fraud first. But there was a lot of other problems with the election because, the more I looked into the elections, it's like, oh, my gosh, the absentee ballot fraud's horrendous. In fact, absentee ballot fraud really got my riles up because I looked at the Hayden election, mayor election, 2 years ago, and it was absolutely outrageous. And I didn't get any help at all from KCRCC with that either. So that was kind of my first contact with trying to get KCRCC to take election fraud seriously, and they were no help at all. But anyway, so I kind of had a warning shot over the bow, but I didn't really go down the absentee ballot path until later. But also there was huge voter roll fraud, and I had already researched that, so I knew. So I wanted to start looking at other things. I was also very concerned about the potential poll book fraud. So I start looking at all of these, and you can't see the bottom of these slides are getting cut off slightly, unfortunately. But basically all of these types of fraud, when I trace them back, like I knew 10X was in charge of voter rolls, right? But I found out they're also in charge of voter rolls, and they're also in charge of absentee ballots. It's like shocking. So if you go to the next slide, we're still on Shocker 5 because this was when I started realizing how I knew 10x was a problem and I knew it was a risk. I didn't realize how completely it controlled everything. So it has access to all of Idaho's election data, all of the data before the election, all the data during the election, all the data after the election in one integrated system, so that if you are going to cheat, and you are going to cheat in any way where you have to make sure the poll books match the tabulator results, and that the people who you are, making fake ballots for actually didn't vote, all of that data is in one place. So somebody can, and what I learned from other people who've been down this path before me is that there's actually many different ways to cheat. And they don't just cheat one way all the time. And they don't cheat the same way in every county. They customize their cheating because they don't want a pattern. So if you see a pattern in one race and you start looking for it next time there's election, they don't want that. They want to be able to do all sorts of, they want to do absentee ballot cheating. They want to do poll book cheating. They have many different ways to cheat. But anyway, these are all the things that the 10x software can do. They control the electronic poll books, so they know exactly who voted and exactly when. They control the election night reporting. Now, the election night reporting is very suspicious because the election night reporting would have had to be involved in the NIC stealing. So there's 3 different tabulators. There's 3 different high-speed tabulators in Kootenai County. And all of them together, I looked at the data, and it was all spread out. It wasn't like in only one of the tabulators or a certain set of, it was spread out among all of the precincts. And that could only be done if it was all coordinated at the highest level. So,
wait. So you're saying that all 3 splits were turning out the same results?
No, they weren't. They weren't. Okay. That's what, okay. So the first data came from just one. And so that, but if you added up all the ballots that were counted on the other 3 tabulators, those didn't match exactly for any of them. But when you added them all up together, they matched perfectly. So that means, this is kind of what put me on to the fact that there has to be, this can't just be done at the tabulator level. There has to be higher intelligence. So, so that's where I started looking into election night reporting, and then I go, oh my gosh, it's the same company that does the poll books.
So 10x though is not running the ESS machines. They're separate. They're separate companies.
Yes, they're separate companies, and we're going to get to the connection.
All right, I'll let you get there.
But it was very complicated. I mean, it was, and you can see how people can get very confused and not see the connections. So anyway, but I knew that the election night reporting had to be involved, and other people had reporting that the election night reporting was very dubious. So I looked at that. It was the same software that does the poll books, same software that manages the voter lists and the registration. And we knew the registration was bad. And we knew when the registration went bad, because you can look at the data and you can see this huge spike in a number of registered voters in 2018. That's exactly when 10x was introduced into Idaho. And when online registration was introduced in Idaho, as soon as it was introduced, within 6 months, the voter registration lists exploded. Oh, but it also does the help desk. Okay, it controls. So we've got a whole bunch of print-on-demand ballots. That's how they do early voting, is with print-on-demand ballots. Well,
what is print-on-demand ballots for those that don't know?
It means that they've got printers in the Kootenai Elections Office that just spew out ballots. So the whole idea of having a careful inventory of making sure, that every ballot is accounted for goes out the window, because the software that is printing the ballots is the same software that is keeping track of the inventory of the ballots. Mm-hmm. So the software controls everything. It can do, when you control everything, there's no way to check that, the poll books match the number of ballots cast, because the software controls the poll books, and it controls the number of ballots cast, and it controls the people who read, it keeps track of the people who register on election day, and it keeps track of the absentee voter. It knows what every voter is doing at all times, and it knows where extra voters might be needed and all this. So it's all, it knows it, it controls the print on demand ballots. It could actually have software in there that could be printing on corrupted ballots. And I can't, messing with ballots implies that somebody in the elections office must be involved, and I don't want to do that. I'm just pointing out that if, in theory, hypothetically, if there was somebody in the elections office who was swapping out ballots or sets of ballots, this software would facilitate it. They could just take a batch of 50 ballots that had been kicked out of the tabulator, and they could put in a new set of 50 ballots. That would require a human being. So I don't want to make any accusations specifically, but the software being able to control the printing of the demand ballots.
Well, frankly, who's ever going to count if the machines are only counting it? And you grab the ballots from the boxes and they're taken back for the tabulator. I mean, how does anybody know if a stack has 1,000 in it versus 1,100 or what have you?
The Tenex software knows exactly what's going on.
And so theoretically, what I'm hearing you say is that the poll books that's controlling everybody that is currently registered,
right,
and who has or has not voted, that it's not necessarily capable of changing. If I went down and voted my vote, but it could say, hey, we know that these people haven't voted, so we're going to grab from the spare pile to change it.
That's the whole problem, is all of this is electronic, and you can have every single person in the entire elections office and all of the precinct workers be 100% honest. You don't need a single corrupt person. And there's ways to cheat that can be all electronic and nobody would ever see it. You've got all these election workers who are working super hard to make sure those ballots get legitimately handed off to that tabulator. They have no control over what actually gets tabulated and reported. So it's just ridiculous. But anyway, it gets worse. Okay, so the print on demand are a big red flag, but they require, at least you can't totally cheat with that without some human being. But anyway, the absentee ballot management, everybody thinks that, the problem's not machine fraud. We have an absentee ballot problem. It's all absentee ballot problem. Number one, this software, the Tenex software, takes electronic requests for absentee ballots. It's the software that decides whether or not this is a legitimate request. It decides where that ballot should get sent to, and it communicates with a company that actually prints the ballots and sends out because the elections offices don't send out their own absentee ballots. They have another company that does that. So between this company that lives in Washington that sends out the absentee ballots and the Tenex, nobody is really in charge in any of the counties of sending out their ballots anymore. That's all taken care of. It's all electronic. So, and it also keeps track of when the absentee ballots are returned, and it even helps with a signature verification. So the absentee ballot management is 100% computerized, and it is this exact same software that I'm having other problems with. And in terms of the skews of the absentee ballots can be skewed just as easily as any other ballot, as the election day ballots. So we always have these super skewed absentee ballots. And yeah, those might be fake ballots, but they might just be skewing the ballots as they come in. It's all possible. There's a million different ways to cheat. They also do that. The software also does asset inventory management, which is basically the chain of custody. So it's like, are you keeping track of chain of custody of, do you know where all your ballot boxes are? Oh, absolutely. We got this. We've entered it all into the machine and it knows where every ballot box is. Great. That's the same fraud software that manages everything. They know who the election workers are. They know what election worker is at every single precinct. They've eliminated handwritten registrations and handwritten poll books, and there is no paper to archive. So if they're going to archive a paper ballot, it's a paper record. This software generates the paper record. It's completely self-referential. There's no way to audit this. This is crazy. And of course, it also handles the campaign finance reporting. So this system has access to 100%. It does basically everything but the tabulator, and we're going to get to that. But the ability for a bad actor to get single access to this. Oh, by the way, all this software runs on the cloud. It runs on the cloud.
Of course it does.
Of course, right? So, it's okay. So we're going to keep going. So 10x software, oh my God, huge problem. So we start looking into 10x. What do we find? Oh my gosh, 10x only has 70 employees for this incredibly complicated software. So there is no possible, and most of these employees are customer service. So they take the software and they customize it for a particular elections officer. I mean, there's real work to do to customize the software for different states and different elections offices.
Well, maybe they're offshoring it to contractors.
They are, we figured out where it came from. It was pretty conclusively, and I can't go into this. There's an article about this, but basically there is a Spanish company. It is not an American company. It's called Skydel or Seidel. I'm going to call it Seidel because I don't know which way. I've heard it both ways. And its American branch is SOE Software. Well, SOE Software happens to be in Tampa, very, very close to where 10x is located. So what Seidel did, it's a Spanish company, is it bought a very small company that just did election management software, and then it ported its software to SOE, and then it took it back and disappeared. And what this red stuff, I don't want to go into this. Let's keep going, because once I realized that there was only 70 employees, I knew that the question is who did it? Was it Seidel? Was it ESS? ESS has a lot of employees, or was it Smartmatic? We've determined that it's Seidel. Okay, so anyway, so 10x is basically running the Seidel software. So you have to know a little bit about who Seidel is. So once you understand what the history of Seidel is, it's pretty obvious why they have to be the people behind this. Basically, Seidel started as a cryptography company, not an election management company, a cryptography company. So this was for election security. This was for, making secure transactions with election data. And they are the world leader, and they hold 40 patents. What this means, since they're the global leader, at least they were the global leader in 2015 in both election cryptography and digital security, but they were also the first company to develop the end-to-end election management program that I've just described as 10x. So Skydel basically developed all those types of programs based on its own encryption code by about 2015, 2016. And 10X was like about, if you go back and look at the Internet Archives, 10X was kind of right behind, 1 or 2 years behind Scytl developing it. And then in 2020, Scytl just went away. Now, I think, but I cannot, and I'm not proving this, but it really looks to me like all of the election management companies are running Scytl software. And the reason I think they have to be is if Scytl is holding all these patents for cryptography, they can't do what they're doing without Scytl's patents. And when you've got a cryptography patent, it's easier to just give people the patent. License your software than it is to license your patents, because then the people who are buying it have to have their own cryptography statistician, digital security person to implement the patents. So it's easier to just license the software. So it makes a lot of sense that everybody.
I remember when the election fraud was unrolling in the end of 2020 into 21, that there were early reports that part of what had occurred with the presidential election was that a Spanish company had been part of the modification of the true votes here in America. So this is interesting now that I'm hearing this for the first time about this Spanish company.
Everybody talks about Smartmatic and tabulators. And there is not, I've heard of Scytl before, and I've heard these things, but they're not front and center. They're not what everybody's talking about. And as you will see, the problems with Scytl get worse and worse and worse. But anyway, before we go on, if you're just listening, what this map here is showing is that Scytl is only 4 miles away from 10X. They're both in Tampa, and both 10X and Scytl are right within 2 miles of the Tampa International Airport. And Smartmatic is in Boca Raton, Florida, which is over 200 miles away from Tampa, but Smartmatic is also just 3 miles away from the Boca Raton Airport. So for Scytl to coordinate with Smartmatic, which is the tabulator fraud center of the universe, would be, they're very, very close to each other, and they just both happen to be right by the airport. So it's very, very suspicious. Scytl is just, it's 100% sure Scytl did this. So anyway, but okay, so now we know who did it. We've got Scytl. There's a lot of proof. Scytl vaporized itself in 2020. It after raising $100,000 in
$100,000. That's not much.
Oh, $100 million.
Oh, okay. I say you said 100,000. I was going to say
no.
That's spending change.
Right. They raised $100 million from venture capital, mostly private equity, in order to expand and get all this stuff out. And then they vaporized. They declared bankruptcy in 2020 in March, and then within 3 months was completely liquidated, and they sold off all their assets. And then the Scytl company got bought by somebody from London and then resold to somebody in Argentina.
When did they raise the 100 million? What year?
In between 2012 and 2018.
So somewhere in the span of 6 years, they blow through $100 million and have to file bankruptcy with 70 employees or something like that.
It doesn't make... Okay, why they filed for bankruptcy? Bankruptcy absolves both the people who bought the assets and the officers of the old company from any liability.
Wait, how do you know that? I've not heard that before. What's your source on that?
Bankruptcy it is okay. I can't go into too much of this. I can tell you, but basically the bankruptcy made it very unclear who even owns these assets.
Okay.
And the people who bought it, if there's back doors in it, can claim that they don't know. And the people who put them in can claim that it's not our company anymore and we have no idea what's going on. And it gives everybody plausible deniability. So it just disappeared the problem. So there's no more ability to blame Skytle for anything, because it's basically just gave out all of its software to all these other companies and licensed on terms that we don't know and have any access to. And it looks like, to me, like everybody's running Skytle. So
Smartmatic, Dominion, ESS,
all of them. It looks like, oh, more than that, there's NoInc and there's VR systems. There's other companies that are competing in the 10x space.
And they're using their software that is, in essence, end-to-end encrypted.
Correct. And it's very likely. Now, I can't prove that NoInc is running Skytle software. So I suspect, but I can't prove that. So I just want to say that I think it's very obvious that 10x is running Skytle, but I haven't spent the time on the other companies. Okay, so let's keep going. Oh, and here we have the poll book and tabulator link. Now, I always knew that everybody talks about how our tabulators are not hooked up to the internet, and that is completely meaningless, because wireless communication between two computers that are within close proximity of another do not need and have never needed the internet. Like a walkie-talkie, the wireless in your house can still work perfectly well if the internet's down, right? I mean, the internet is an internet. It is a protocol for passing data on through through routers. They're not needed. So I've always known that any computer that was in the vicinity of a tabulator could communicate wirelessly with that. But what shocked me, and somebody had to point this out to me because I couldn't even believe what they're. So what are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. So the title 34 is elections. Chapter 24 is the part that determines the laws relating to tabulators, which are here called vote tally systems. So parts 1 and 2 have existed, probably been tweaked for a long, long time. And they're basically a laundry list of all of the things that, in order for the Secretary of State to approve, the tally system has to be able to do A, B, C, D, and E, and it has to be able to provide this level of security, A, B, and C for part 1, right? So parts 1 and 2, the definition of what is allowed in a tabulator has existed forever, and it's never made any reference to internets. So in 2024, somebody added this code, and the code said, we are making it illegal for our tabulators to be hooked up to the internet. So the code for 3 is, no vote tally system shall be connected to the internet. That's great. But I even said you can communicate wirelessly without the internet.
A hard connection.
They added the next line. No vote tally systems shall receive or transmit data through wireless communications. Great. This is perfect. So far, so good. This is a great law to have on the books. Now, the next sentence. The provisions of this subsection shall not apply to electronic poll books. What the hell is that for? What? Okay, this is not saying electronic poll books.
Well, but I mean, I want to throw this out. Could that be, we go into vote on election day and we have to go sign in on the little tablet that's obviously tied to the electronic poll book, right?
Okay, it is well known that poll books can talk to the internet. Nobody. They're defined to be. They can't operate without the internet.
Right.
Okay, so poll books can definitely talk to the internet. This is not poll book code. This is tabulator code. So when it says this section does not apply to poll books, and it is in a tabulator section, it is saying that poll books are allowed by law in Idaho to talk to tabulators. I'm sorry. This is why I'm calling it a shocker.
Why would they do that?
There's no explanation in the world why this is any good. And we all, okay, I'm going to skip the quote from the Secretary of State, but basically on a different.
No, let's do it. I want to hear what the
Okay.
bald-headed genius has to say.
Well, okay, before I ever found this code, I found a video where the Secretary of State was touring the Bannock Elections office, and he said, quote, with poll books and precinct scanners, and a precinct scanner is a tabulator, we know in detail when people are showing up to vote, and we've been able to use that to influence participation. What is he saying there? Okay, I don't want to go too much into it. That was like, it's like, oh, what? You just admitted that you're using, that the software is telling you who's voted and what the ballots are, and you have all this data, and you're doing, what do you mean you're using it to influence participation? This is crazy. Okay, so let's keep going.
Has anybody ever asked him, hey, why don't you go into a little more detail what you meant by this quote?
He just he is an
I'm happy to do it.
Okay, no, he is an expert at saying things that are not technically false, but are effectively false. So you could call it a half-truth. A good example of this is, our machines aren't cooked up to the internet. But I have a whole article about all of, I have an article of it. It's called, I don't have the name of the article here, unfortunately. But it basically just says that it lists 12, he has something he's promoting now, which is 12 things that we do to make sure our elections are secure and accurate. And I've rebutted, I think, 8 of the 12 where he's lying or misrepresenting. No, I don't want to say lying. I'm saying grossly misrepresenting, and like he says, they're all certified. And then certification means nothing. So anyway, I'm not going to get into a fisticuffs with the SOS because he is just a professional prevaricator, and everything coming out of his mouth is twisted, and he can't not know this stuff. He knows what's going on, and you're not going to get him to admit to anything. So I just wouldn't waste my time. Okay, so let's go. Here we go. This is huge, and I have to go over it really quickly because this is a giant rat hole. I spent months on this, because my first love is not elections, it's smart cities. And what happened is in the session, the 2025 session, the House and Senate passed a bill called House Bill 339 that was presented as an election integrity bill. But if you read again, the devil is in the details when you read the actual Idaho law. Now, this is coming up, at least half of my shocks have to do with reading the laws on Idaho's books and how they facilitate horrendous election fraud, and in this case, horrendous abuse of voter data. Because age 39 now, it's in a code in a different thing, but it basically grants the Secretary of State almost unlimited power to collect personal data on all Idaho voters and to share. And it's not just government data. He can actually get data from any company operating within Idaho jurisdiction, and including financial companies and credit companies. So it's insane how much data this bill allows him to collect. Okay, let me just rant for a second here. I have talked to all of our representatives about this. I brought it up at a town hall. I've talked to them personally. I've sent them emails. Everybody knows about this, and nobody will do anything about it. And this is digital ID. This isn't even election fraud. So what horrified me is then I went back and I'm going to have to read this here. So then I went back and looked again at the voter registration software, the 10x voter registration software. It is called the part of the software that does voter registration is called Voter Central, and it's billed as an all-inclusive voter management system. And then this is what it says: complete voter record all in one place. Users can access vast amounts of information in the voter profile. Voter Central tracks changes and transactions for each voter, stores images and documents associated with the voter, and maintains a complete record of voting history. So the amount of data that's legitimate is very simple. It is your name, your address, your driver's license number, your date of birth. This software can store huge amounts of data about you. And it is everything you would need for the back end of digital ID. And I can't even go into all the other reasons. I know they're doing this. And then we had Dr. Frank here 2 weeks ago, and this was one of my main questions for him. I said, Dr. Frank, I'm looking at this, and it looks to me like, well, first of all, he confirmed everything I said about Tenix and Seidel. He said, yes, we've known that for years. I said, well, why aren't you shouting it from the streets? He says, well, some people are, but that's not my thing. But anyway, then I said, well, what about the digital ID being done with the Tenix software? And he says, oh yeah, we've known about that too, that they're doing that. So the voter registration stuff is being used to do the back end of digital ID. They're using the voter stuff instead of this isn't being done through the DMV. This is being done through the elections office, and it's being consolidated by the Secretary of State. And again, this is something I've been really pushing and writing. I've written 3 articles about it. I've mailed them out to everybody. I posted them on social media. Everybody should know about this, and none of our legislators, none of our conservative legislators will touch this with a
Well, look, correct me if I'm wrong. All of our North Idaho District 1, 2, 3 representatives voted for this, correct?
No, some of them didn't vote for it, but they won't bring it up again. Like I said,
Did Heather Scott vote for it?
I believe she voted against it.
Good, because I've been seeing a lot of X posts where she's concerned about the growing surveillance state, and I'm like, well, what are you guys doing to stop it?
Well, that's exactly it. I said we have to rein in this data collection, and I wrote, I sent complete legislation to all these people. There is not a single representative in North Idaho who hasn't heard this, and then a whole bunch of I drove to Twin Falls twice to present this information.
So are the representatives just that dumb that they're not reading this, or are they actually complicit in what's going on?
Let's go to the next slide, and then it's all going to make sense.
All right, copy that.
Okay, we're back to slide number 10, where we started.
The damn Masons.
Okay, I know my Idaho history. Freemasons founded Idaho. They leave their marks everywhere. If you look at the Idaho legislator page, there is a picture of a Masonic eye with 2 columns that are, they cropped this picture perfectly so it would show you an eye and 2 columns. It's a Masonic wink, wink, nudge, nudge. This is a true, we've got, I can't go, a completely different.
We'll do a different show.
Different show. But all I'm saying is the Masons are, and I'm not talking just about Freemasons. I said that before. We're talking FOP. We're talking Rotary Club. We're talking certain elements of the Mormon Church. We're talking, it goes, Eagles, it goes on and on. And I think I showed you once remember that audio that we'll leave a link to that audio, because this is a good opening to that. But the point is, the Masons are very, very powerful. They hold the upper hand, especially in the executive offices, but also in the legislature. And these legislators know perfectly well. I mean, I'm not saying every legislator is one of them. I'm saying that the legislators are either in on it, or their handlers are in on it, or their big donors are in on it, or they just know that if they try and that if they push this, nothing's going to happen, and they're going to get a huge blowback. And they think, I can't do anything about fixing this, but maybe I can.
So you're not saying that Heather Scott and Joe Aliferi and Vito Barbie are not Freemasons? You're not saying they're Freemasons?
No, I'm saying they are.
I want to make sure
they are in a legislator that is controlled by Freemasons in a state that is controlled. But
I didn't. You know what? 5 years ago, I probably would have just gone, whatever. That's a little over the top. But I have to tell you that all my years in Washington State, I knew that some of that stuff was odd, and I read about it. But when I experienced it during the race, and the freaks, the nerds that would come out and confront me because I said I would be part of a secret society, and they lost their shit over it. I mean, and then seeing all of the other weird things going on, I mean, it to me has become more and more plausible to what you're saying. I don't care if that offends people out there watching it. That is my belief. And I think there's more than enough evidence these days that they are doing a lot of bad things.
Well, I'm on record as no, I'm not going to say proving, but I'm going to say providing a lot of evidence that, your opposition, Mr. Norris, is under the control. Whether or not he's a Mason, he's under the control. And I think I've provided some information on other people, but the point here is not to name names. We can name names later. I'm not going to name names until after the election.
Sure.
But because they're going to rig it, however they're going to rig it. And if I tried to say this team or that team is Masons, they'd all blame me for.
Be careful, Neil Urig's about ready to blow a gasket. He hears you talking about that.
You're causing divisions. You're causing divisions. It's there's no divisions. Okay. So you figure it out yourself. I mean, I think if the election's going to get rigged, it's going to get rigged. I don't think there's a whole lot we can do about it at this point. Anyway, so that's about all I have for now. I think we should definitely do a follow-on when we, after the election.
I'm certain this is going to light a lot of people's hair on fire. They're going to, come out in their droves. But this really should, a couple things. One, I'll say it. Somebody should take the data that you have provided and run the data themselves. And if they truly don't believe your figures, we welcome them to say, hey, we don't believe it, and this is why. They should be able to prove that. But, I think that the fact that we are watching the technocratic state emerge the way it is, I don't personally believe that if they can throw one election at any level, federal or state, and they obviously have done that, then what reason do I have to believe that in Kootenai County, the elections are secure? And when it comes when it comes to like 10X or whoever is possibly programming it, again, hypothetically, if there is somebody that is going to say in the NIC race, we want these three people to win these seats. I mean, is that coming from a local buyer that's buying this election? Is it coming from a state? Is it coming from federal? Who would be able to pull the strings enough and pay the kind of money that it would take to throw an election?
There's, I have three, because I knew this was where it was going, and because I knew that Freemasonry was going to be a very big controversial thing, I have not one, not two, but 3 articles on Freemasonry on the North Idaho Slow Growth website. And maybe I can give you links to them, and you can just post links to them. I've been studying the Freemasons for like 15 years, and I've been studying North Idaho politics for at least 5. And the last article I wrote, because I needed to set the ground, you need to you need to clear up a lot of misconceptions first. But in the last article was Masonic Idaho, and it gives a history of the Freemasons who founded Idaho. I mean, there is no question that Freemasons founded Idaho. Well, they said it. There's no questions that the first 12, that at least
field governors, the territorial governors, and then the actual state governors, right?
Yeah. Everything's been set up by Masons. Yeah. So, it's they've been doing this for hundreds of years. They've been setting up they've been setting up every county, every state, that this is how we, and so if they say the right things,
Mm-hmm.
and they say they want, a representative democracy. The only thing is they want to be the representatives, right? So that's the game, is people think that they're voting. And again, this is why even getting rid of the fraud machines is good, and we have to do it. But
I'm going to be controversial and
what
say,
we really need to do is out all the Freemasons. That's really what we need to do.
Well, I'm looking forward to you doing that and watch them crawl out from under the rocks. Yes, you heard me right, Freemasons. Not a fan. Not a fan of you at all, especially those of you in Kootenai County. In fact, I think it's fascinating that we have at least two police associations, the Post Falls Police Department and the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office, that have these fraternal order of police organizations where their symbology, the symbols are taken from the Freemasons, the square and the compass, and all their squares, and it's weird to me. It's weird. People of reasonable mind could look at this and go, what's up with the little special club that these guys are all part of? So I know we're going to blow a lot of minds by saying this, whether it's the Freemasons or not. Somebody clearly, from what you're showing, has the ability to skew with our elections. And I'll go on the record to say, I think that for the most part, absentee ballots for most people is bullshit. I mean, there are certain exceptions. I get it. Early voting, bullshit. All these damn Republicans that love the early voting, what is wrong with you? And lastly, it should be you vote in person the same day. Paper ballot gets counted by hand by real people. And I think that would eliminate a lot of concerns. Now, again, humans can make mistakes, but
we have there's a bigger problem, and the bigger problem. I mean, first of all, the elections are ridiculous, and fraud vitiates everything, and we have a completely fraudulent government, top to bottom, and that's just we have proven fraud. We can prove that there's fraud, we can't, so we don't really have legitimate government. So I'm people are just, this is what people are terrified of. So I'm, just go ahead and yell at me. I don't care. But the thing is, when they freak out about, I do want to be very clear that Freemasonry of the 19th century looks very, very different than Freemason of the 21st century. And it is much more diffuse, much more diffuse. So it's not like a whole bunch of these people who are at the lodge, the bikers, with the Masonic bikers. That's not what Freemasonry really is. And so what in my articles I call Freemasonry the traditional lodge, with the the
nerds,
square,
all the nerds.
Yep. But it's all secret societies, and there's a whole bunch of other organizations that are under control of the high-level Masons.
And maybe I should do this while we're talking.
Yeah. So no, don't. So anyway, so that's so we've got a huge problem with fraud, and we've got an even bigger problem with people who are serving master. They're not serving the people of Idaho. They're serving their club, the big club. I mean, I usually call it the big club instead of the Masons, but the big club is the Masons. So and it's real. It's real, and they have a system. It's not haphazard. They have thought things out, like you see in the laws. They've thought these out. They've put these laws on the books to make it impossible for them to lose.
Yeah.
And like it's ridiculous. And now they control the legislature, and we can't ever get these laws changed because we can't get people elected because it's just crazy. Yeah. So I'm not worried about it. I mean, you can, and I think it's horrible, but I have faith that there will be a solution, but I don't think it's going to be a small, easy solution. I don't, we go back there and change the code in the laws, and we do something to get fair elections, and we have a huge problem. So we need to recognize the extent of the problem, and it's big, big, big. And this is Idaho. This is Idaho. You know, this is
the surveillance state is upon us, and maybe some people are waking up. I think it's a little bit too late, but we're still hoping.
It's never too late.
We appreciate you coming on and giving us your work. Again, it's mostly way above my head. Appreciate your ability to break. Well, you know the technical end. You're able to relay it to the layman's terms, so to speak. But we will have you back, and thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us your work.
Oh, you're very welcome. Had a great time.
God
Okay,
bless.
thanks a lot.